Hello everyone. Today we're gonna work on auto layouts. I want everyone to follow along because I want you to work through what I'm going to be doing as well. So what we're going to do first is we're gonna create a new page. This is going to be auto layout exercise. You can put it on top or at the bottom. That's all up to you. And it's going to be blank, of course. And then we can create a frame, no matter what really size. We're gonna call this a layout. So now I have my auto layout frame inside my auto layout example or exercise. All right, everyone with me so far?
Yes.
All right. So what we're going to work on right now is we're going to create a button, and this button, the text of this button is going to basically determine how big the button is going to be. So we're going to type something in. So this is going to be my button right here. So you can see I have, let me zoom in. This is my button. So there are different ways to do things. So we could make a background and then tie this in and add an auto layout on those two objects. Or we can add an auto layout to this already. So Shift A. And what it does is it creates a frame. So I did Shift A. So on Figma, you can go to Help and Account and then go down to keyboard shortcuts for all of you who love keyboard shortcuts. And you can click on the keyboard shortcuts here, put this here, and they have them organized into tabs. So you can access some of these and become a little bit faster by using keyboard shortcuts. I know some of these, I don't know all of them. And then layout, and this is kind of like the layout of your keyboard, so you can choose what keyboard you're using. Should I go over it again?
Yeah, can you show me where the account was?
So if you go into Figma icon on the menu, the Figma menu, and you go all the way down to Help and Account, and then keyboard shortcuts. And so you can go in and then you can see all of the keyboard shortcuts, all of these goodies right here. So now we're gonna learn a couple of tricks using auto layout. So auto layout is really cool in the sense that it tries to figure out where you are at already on your layout, and it tries to add the spacing that you have on your components. For example, I want to start with that. So for example, I have a couple of different squares here, and then if I were to put an auto layout to this, which is Shift and A, what auto layout tries to do, and you can see auto layout here. I'm going to undo that so that we can see the difference of what happens, and also on your layers. So I have 4 individual rectangles here, right? You can see them over here on the left side on my layers panel. So then I can grab all of these and then Shift A to add the auto layout, and see how on the right hand side, how it changed and added the auto layout controllers. And also, if you see here, it grouped my 4 objects. So I'm gonna add auto layout again. And another way that you can add auto layout is on your right hand side, once you have selected what you want inside your auto layout, you can then click on auto layout, the plus sign here on your properties panel, and it'll add the auto layout. And so what happened is it grouped, see how it grouped? It has these 3 rectangles here. That's how you know something is an auto layout or has an auto layout. And then I can see that I have all 4 rectangles here inside now my auto layout frame. So what happens is when I added auto layout to this, Figma tried to figure out how much space is in between each of these objects. And it added, you can see it here. I can modify this, right? Or I can modify it here in the horizontal gap between items. And so I can add 20 gap in between, or I can decrease the gaps between the objects that I have. Another way to do this is you can drop down and also say auto. What auto will do is, depending on the size of my frame, it will set the same gap between all of my rectangles automatically. So let's try it out. I'm going to go into auto, which is going to be the same. But as I expand it, see how it's keeping the same gap between each of my objects. Is everyone with me so far?
Yes.
Very good. Now, another thing that we can do with auto layout is how we want the break to happen in my frame window. For example, let's say I have these 4 objects and I'm using this for a desktop. But then I copy this and I want to use this for my mobile. Right now, if I were to make it smaller for my mobile, they're gonna start going in, because not only do I have it in auto, but I also have it in horizontal layout. So if I say instead, what I want for you to do is, as I go smaller, when they're depending on the gaps, so let's say we have 14 gaps here. Depending on the gaps, I want for this to wrap around. So when I have a break that is smaller than this here, which is this size that I have, 162 width, is going to wrap around and is going to then have my rectangles go below. And so this way we can then start playing with how we want our object to be organized in our layout, depending on the view of our layout. For example, mobile, tablet, or desktop. Is everyone with me so far?
Yes. Yep.
Perfect. Now we can also say where we want the alignment of our objects to happen. For example, I wouldn't necessarily have this aligned this way on a mobile, because then I have too much gap on one side. You can see so much gap on the right, and there's no gap on the left. So what I can do instead is, yes, I can definitely add gaps in here, but that's not necessarily how I want to do it. And we are going to cover this tool later on. What I want to focus on is where I want the layout to be aligned to. And so I want it to be aligned to the center. And so now that it's aligned to the center, Figma is trying to figure out automatically how much space we need to center this. So now what's happening is I can add more gap or less gap, and as you can see, it's behaving in a certain way depending on what I'm adding. So then we can also do, let's say, let me go back here. We can also say, instead of wrap around, I can also tell it to strictly do only down. I only want for it to go down, to not wrap around, but to have the behavior where it's going to organize my objects vertically. And so this is how we have them vertically, and we have them at 14 each. Different ways that I can add gap. I can click on this line over here and I can just scroll and add gap, or I can just click on that line and add the gap in. With me so far?
Yep.
Very good. So now that we know if we want it to be centered, and by the way, auto is space in between, so it's adding the space equally between objects. It will look as separate lines. If I by any chance add, then see how the lines got in very closely, and now this is aligned just to the left, or aligned to the center, or aligned bottom center, which we're gonna go, why would we want to align to bottom center or top center? Okay, what we're going to do is I'm going to delete this and we're going to create a button. Let's start from new. I'm going to add button as a text in here. And we're going to add auto layout to this. And I'm going to show you fill and hug, which are two different things that can completely mess your components in. But at the same time, if you know how to work very well with them, they will make your life a lot easier. So we're going to do Shift A and we're going to add a frame around this button. And Figma is adding 10 space in between, and then it's adding 10 padding on the right and the left. And it's also adding padding on the top and at the bottom. And so we see here that it created a frame and we have our button and the frame. And usually I call this button and then I call this text because this is the text of button. So now what I want is I want my button to be a little bit closer on the bottom and at the top. So instead of adding it manually one by one, I click on option and then I can scroll both of them at the same time. And then I'm gonna have this at 5. I could also just add 5 here. Okay, so now that we have button, look at what Figma has done. Figma is adding a hug, and see the little lines here? Did you see those? Let me get really in very close, and I'm going to hover over hug here and see those lines, those red lines. What this is telling me is that my frame is hugging the text. So if I click on this and I say something like this button is really long, now when I hover over this again, let's grab this and hover over this, see how it's still remaining where the padding on either side is the same. So my frame is still around the text. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give it a color. So I'm going to add fill to this. Let's add the blue and let's change the text to white. All right. So now you can see the background of the button around the text. And as I change the text, the background or that frame is growing with my text. And so this is done by setting the width to hug. So usually I don't have hug on a button because if I were to break the line here, guess what's going to happen? It's going to grow with it as well. I don't necessarily want that. No, don't grow. I don't want for it to grow vertically. I want only for it to grow horizontally. So if I want for it to grow horizontally, what do you think I should do? Give me a guess. Fixed. Very good. So then the vertical hugging, I'm going to change to fixed height. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down the fixed height. Oh, let me undo this for a second. I have it on hug. Let me take this out because when we do things, we want to do them before we start playing with the alignments. So I want the height to be as I have it. So I'm going to say fixed height here because now I have the fixed height that I want, which is 25. Now I can keep on typing, and I can hit on that return key, and now it's keeping my text inside the frame. The frame is not hugging or growing with it. Now I wouldn't put a second line to a button, but that is how you can create a button, and we can add a corner radius to our button. So then I'm gonna go in here and say shop now, and I want a corner radius. So what I can do is our corner radius is in the right hand side on our properties panel, and we can do really stylized things, or let's do 0 there. or I can just add it here and I just want 10 corner radius on everything. Everyone with me so far?
Yep.
Yes? I gotta hear you guys. So now we have where our button is fixed on the height and is hug horizontally. And so now I basically have a button, and here's my button. Yay, so we've created our first button, everyone. Now we can do other really cool things with text. So once you have your button created, you can create it into a component. So creating it into a component. Now we know it's a component because it's got the 4 diamonds. And then what you can do is you can jump into the text and you can add a property. And so this can be change text. And so you create a property where now anyone that copies that button and has an instance of that button can change the text here. Hello. Isn't that cool? Now we have a button component with many different instances. So I can then say click here. Of course, because there should be a button named click here. And we can change the color of this one because it's our instance, but it's not going to change the other ones. However, if I were to go into the parent and change the color here, let's say red, it will change it only on the instance that has the same color as the parent. Because I changed the color of this guy, it's disregarding that. Okay? Everyone with me so far?
Yes.
All right. Now, do we understand hug?
Yes.
Good. Now we're going to go into fill. So we're going to fill something in. So usually fill can get a little complex. So let me see how I can explain this one to you guys. So I'm going to have 2 rectangles here. So in fill, let me change the color of this guy. And this guy is going to have another color. Let's do green, why not? So I have rectangle 1 and rectangle 2. And I'm going to put rectangle 1 and 2 in one inside the other. So then what we're going to do is we're going to do Shift A on this, and we're going to put it in an auto layout. And so now we have a rectangle, and then we have auto layout on the back. So Figma, what it's trying to do is, well, this one is bigger. And because this one is bigger, I think you want to make this your frame. And so it created the frame for us. But it used the layer that was the biggest on the back. Do you see it? How we only have 1 rectangle, but then our frame became rectangle number 2. So then what I'm going to do is I want right now the larger rectangle is set as fixed and nothing is happening. The guy inside is not really following it. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab rectangle number 1 and we're going to say, I want for the rectangle that is inside this object to follow the frame. So what I'm going to do is I want to fill the container. Did you see how it filled a little bit the container? I'm going to show you how this will work better. It's because Figma added padding here. But I'm going to make my padding all the way to 0. And now what I want to do is the rectangle inside, I want for this rectangle to expand and to fill the container that it's outside it. So I want this guy to fill the container that is outside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit fill and look what happens. Boop. See how it filled the frame? Is everyone with me so far?
Mm-hmm.
Now, why would I use fill? You guys are wondering, why would I use fill? We know why we are going to use hug. Hug is very useful for buttons or for cards, for things like that. We want that background to grow with our content. But sometimes we want our content to grow or to adapt to our frame. And I'm going to give you an example. For example, if I have links this is my link. I create it into a component. Then I have my text. Then I have another link. Okay. All right. So then my component is, okay. So this is my component. And now I have the child of that component. And I'm going to copy this guy and add him a couple of times. And now I'm going to grab him. I'm going to distribute him equally. And then I'm going to do Shift A. Now I have him in a frame. And that frame needs to be on auto. And I should be able to add more links to this. Let's add a fill so that you can see where I'm at. And I'm going to add a fill, different color. Let's do blue so that you see where I'm at. Okay. All right. So then my link is blue, and I can, do you see how I can turn off and on links? But I can also add links. See? Now, what I want for my frame to do, see my frame is on fixed. I would have the vertical be fixed, but then the horizontal, I would have it to hug content and do auto. And so now when I copy a link, do you see what happens? It adds a link and it adds space in between my links. Now, if I have a logo, let's say this is a logo. So let's say I want a logo here, right? On my bar menu. Why is this guy not getting bigger? What's going on? Okay, so I have my bar menu and I have my logo, and then I also want my links in my bar menu. But I want for this to, whenever I make it bigger, for everything to also react to the space and change sizes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to add everything. I'll put it somewhere where I want it, and then add, so I have all three selected. You can see here that all three of them are selected. Let me put this guy up here. So I have all three selected. I'm going to hit on Shift A. And so now this guy is fixed. My background is fixed, but my frame inside, instead of fixed, I'm going to put it to fill. And so now it's filling the entire space, and I have all of my links having gaps in between so that it's filling out the entire space. So then what I want to do is I want to add in between, I want to add a little bit of space, a little bit of padding on both sides. And if you click on the individual padding icon, it will drop down, and you can also add more padding to the left side. So you can add padding to the left side, or you can add padding to the right side. And the same with top or bottom. So now my frame, since the vertical is not set to hug, is remaining in its fixed height. However, if I were to say hug my content and I add padding, then if I were to add a space, that should hug these guys. Are these guys? These guys are not hug. Component is probably not hugging. That is fixed. Shift A to hug. There we go. So now it's hugging. That's why. Okay. So this is what I was like, why is it not hugging? It's because my component did not have the auto layout to hug on vertically. So now it's, as you can see, now it's hugging. So everything is hugging. So now this is hugging vertically. All right, so now this is growing vertically, but what I want to do is I want these links. I can change the links, and as I change them, the space in between them will change because it's trying to keep those gaps equally. So then kitchen, woman, and so you can see how it's kind of like realigning my navigation. So then if I make my bar bigger or smaller, you can see that my links now are following the bar. Is everyone with me so far? I know this is complex. Like I even get a little confused at times.
It's a lot, but yeah.
I'm with you.
Oh, good. So this is why I would have where the frame would be filled. See how my frame inside here, where all of my links are? So my individual frames are on hug. But what they're hugging is they're hugging the text. And then my frame outside of that, which is holding all of my links, I want for this to resize depending on my outside bar. So this is why it's on fill. And so then I have this rectangle logo. See, this is why I have this frame outside, which is my nav bar. And so my nav bar now determines the size, but then all of my links are kind of like dancing, and Figma is then automatically figuring out how much space should be in between them. And I don't have to do that, which is really awesome, right? I can also say, you know what, instead of space between, I just want the space to be fixed to, let's say, 20. But whenever it gets smaller than that, I want for it to wrap around, okay? So now in my nav bar, they are going to wrap around. And so they're gonna fall at the bottom. Everyone with me so far? Is anyone confused? I don't want you guys to be confused. And as you start playing with this, your head is gonna start understanding what's going on. Let's do something a little bit simpler then, because I threw you guys really quickly into a nav bar already. Let's create a card. So we're gonna create a rectangle here. And so holding shift, you can set the proportions equally. So, and that also happens with any of the objects for the eclipse and the star. See, you hold shift. So then we're gonna create an image, and then we're gonna do a title. Okay, title. And we're also going to create a description. Here we go. So that's gonna be a bit long later on. We're gonna set it to 10. I'm gonna set the title to 14. And then what I want, I've set a title and a description. What I want is for whenever the description or the title gets big, I want for a background, here we go, for a background to grow with my title and my description. So I'm gonna make this light, okay? And so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to grab all of these items. So I have all of these items selected. I'm going to hit Shift A. I'm going to add auto layout, or I can click on the plus sign over here and I'm gonna add auto layout. And then instead of fixed on the height, I want the height to be what? Can anyone give me a clue on what the height should be? So I want the background to grow with how much text I have when it goes down. So what would I set the frame on the height? What would I set it to? Give me a guess. Hug?
Just hug.
Very good.
Yes. So is there another option between hug and fixed?
Very good. So there's fixed, there's hug, and now what's going to happen is...
But fill isn't for vertical, it's only for horizontal, right?
Oh, fill is for both. You can do fill on both. I just use it mostly on horizontal. But now, if I start writing here, see how my card is resizing the height according to my text. Is everyone with me?
So far, mine is not reacting that way. Not in or not. I'm not there yet.
You're not there yet?
I'm trying to figure out what it is.
Okay, that's okay. This is, like I said, I myself get confused sometimes using this. This is one that is most challenging to learn. I think auto layout is a little challenging to learn, especially if you have so many things nested within. If you have a lot of frames nested one inside the other. So one more question. So I'm going to resize this, and as you can see, I'm resizing this, and nothing is happening to my content inside. So let me undo that. What do I need to do for the image to resize horizontally and vertically? Say that this is the image. And while you give me the answer, I'm going to look for an image for this. So what should I set the image to? Fill. Very good. So I'm going to put the cat there. And what I'm going to do is, the cat is fixed right now, horizontally and vertically. My background is not impacting the height or the width of the cat. However, like Chris mentioned, if I put fill container here on my cat, what do you think is going to happen when I change the size of the background? It's going to resize according to my card. See? Is everyone with me so far?
What determines the anchor point for that image about how it's going to resize in a space like that?
That's a very good question. I don't have the answer to that, but what you can do is, instead of having it as fill, you can have it as fit or as crop. When you have it as crop, you can grab this guy and make it, why is this guy not making itself bigger? Come on, here we go. And so when you resize this, it's gonna just move the cat in. So then now I want to also have the title to change, to grow with my card. So how do you think I would go about doing that? So I want my title that when I type and type and type, it does not go over my card. I want for it to create a second line after a certain width. So how would I go about doing that? Anyone has an idea?
Well, mine is doing that, but I don't know how I did it.
Very good. Well, if yours is doing that, that's awesome.
I just can't.
You may be able to click on it and kind of like see some parameters that it may have already.
The only thing I can see is that the horizontals on fill and the verticals on fit.
Very good. So then the horizontal is on, what was it?
Fill.
Mm-hmm.
And verticals is fixed.
Oh, vertical is fixed. Okay, let's see if that works. All right, so what's happening is it's giving us the illusion that is going to the second line. But do you see the box surrounding the text?
Right.
Is only surrounding, is only surrounding one line of text. It's not surrounding both lines of text. So let me delete that, because whenever I make changes to my auto layout, I want for it to anticipate what I want it to do. So for example, I'm going to grab hug content here, and now more text, and now you can see, did you see what happened? I'm gonna delete that T, see? And now my entire layout is respecting that height of the text.
Yes, got it.
Very cool. So we're gonna hug so that it keeps with my text and it keeps growing with my text. But now my entire frame is also respecting this gap, but also the second line addition. So if I even add more to this, see, it's respecting. Now there's one thing that I don't want for this to do, and is I don't want my cat to disappear as I add lines to the text. How would I go about doing that? How would I go about having where my title now is not eating away from my cat's image? And I'm sorry that this session is very different. I'm asking questions is because auto layouts is so complex. I want you guys to have the mechanisms of your brain kind of like, how would I do that? And then when I give you the answer, it's like, oh, I see how this is working now. Okay, so I'm not trying to be mean, I promise. I'm just trying for you guys to kind of like see how this works. Are you seeing what's happening to the cat? How do I stop that? How do I stop the cat from getting smaller and smaller as I add text? What's happening? Anyone? Okay.
Can you fix the cat? Can you fix the cat's position so it moves the text downward instead of moving the cats upward?
I may have the cat be fixed height. Yeah. And it still remains as a card. Let's put 10 here so that it looks a little bit more like a card. We can also add a line, and we can add that rectangle in between, a little bit darker. That's one way of, like I said, there's many ways of doing this. Okay, and so that's how I would have my card. I would just have the image then be fixed to the height, so that when I have, let me change this here, when I have more than one card and I change, like for example the row would change, then the cat would resize just its width. Now this line that I just added, I want this line to also grow with my card. As you can see here, it's not growing with my card. What would I do for this line to keep up with my card?
Auto layout it.
Auto layout, it's already inside an auto layout. It's inside a frame. And I'm gonna call this card.
You auto layout the cat and the line. That makes sense?
Yes, it makes sense. You could, however, I have all of the contents inside an auto layout card. And I just want this rectangle to keep with the width of my card. So how can I accomplish that? I'm gonna give you a hint. It's right there.
That's the width fill.
To fill, very good. So now what it's doing is it keeps its size. It's gonna keep its size. Whenever I grab the card and I resize the card, it's gonna resize the width with the card. Everyone with me so far? No, I know.
Yeah.
I know. I promise that as soon as you start playing with it, you're going to start figuring out what goes first. You have 3. But first of all, you have to know that you just have 3. Fixed, fill, and hug, right? Fixed, hug, content, and fill when the content is inside. When the content is inside, you can add fill. Let's see here. You can do fill or fixed. When the content is outside and Figma is thinking, oh, this is a frame for the content inside, then you can have fixed or hug. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be like a trial and error situation. We're not going to get it 100%. We're going to have to play with it. Watching the video on YouTube was helpful.
Good.
I think just doing more of that, I think, is key.
I see. Yes. So there are constraints that you can do also, depending on how you want things to grow or to behave, which is right here in constraints. For example, let's say I want a line. I want to create a line, and I want this line to be right here next to my text, and I want for it to grow with my text. So I'm gonna add it here, right there, inside frame 2. See how is messing my layout now because it's adding it on top? Because I have this frame 2. This is my text. I'm gonna call it bed, my text bed. So I have all of my text is in here, but this rectangle is adding itself to my layout, and it's adding itself to the top. I don't necessarily want that. This one is hug. Okay. Why is my card? My card should be hug. All right. So see what is happening here? It's adding on top. What I want is for this object to not affect the layout of my text. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this rectangle, and do you see here absolute position? So right on the right hand side on my properties panel, there is a absolute position. If I click on that, see what happens. See, look at the blue rectangle in the title. Boop. Do you see that? So it
Yes.
didn't take it out of my frame. It's still inside my frame. However, it is not taking part of the auto layout. And so now I can even move it outside. However, I want for this to behave in a certain way. I want for this, let's make it a little bit thinner, to whenever I add more text, for this to grow as well. So I want for that line to grow whenever I add text. And for this, I would do that, and I would resize this guy first. How do you think I'm going to do that? I want for this line to grow whenever I add to this. And I want that line to keep on growing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select on the rectangle, and there are constraints for this rectangle. And so these are the constraints. The constraint that I want is for the top and the bottom to follow the layout still. So if I go into top and I select top and bottom, right? So now it's highlighting the top and the bottom. It should, of course, this is live, so it may not. So I can add, and now it's growing. Do you see how it's doing with my text?
That's pretty cool.
So you can set constraints and play, we're gonna play with all of these. You can set constraints to still respect the height or even the width of certain items when they are inside a frame. If I were to take this guy out, and I'm not gonna resize him. I just took him outside. Oh, it's still growing. It shouldn't have done that. See, this is where I'm like, I shouldn't have done that, but it still is. So it's still respecting the constraints set to it. If I set it outside of the card, is it still doing it? Yeah, it is. Very cool. That's crazy. It's still respecting that. Okay, so let me undo this because I want to check something real quick. So then I'm undoing all of this. That rectangle was inside this frame or auto layout frame. Let's take them outside of my card entirely and then do the top and bottom. Let me see if that will work. There it is. See how it's not respecting it now? Is everyone with me?
Yes, Christine, I have to leave. I have an appointment today, so I'm jumping out of the meeting. But This was a lot, but very helpful.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll take some time just to play around.
Yes, we could do a part 2, and then we're gonna go more in detail for auto layout and each of the things that I just discussed here.
Okay.
So that we can have different examples and build different things with it. I think that may help everyone wrap their heads around it.
Sounds good. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Aye.
All right, so did you see how when I took it out, and I set it to top and bottom, it did not respect the auto layout of the text bed frame? So this is where it gets confusing because sometimes things will react in a very unexpected way. And it's because you had set it up one way or with a certain type of auto layout, but then you took that component out or you set another auto layout on top or inside or nested an auto layout inside your auto layout. And so funny things start happening with your auto layouts. So far, how is everyone feeling about this?
It's going to take time to master.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is not only are we recording this session, but also what I'm going to do is I'm going to send a couple of more videos that I think may help everyone wrap their heads around auto layout so that you guys become pros at auto layout. Even better than me, because this auto layout it's very powerful and there is still a lot more to it. For example, we can have different circles here, and I'm gonna change the color of these so that you can see what happens here, because we can also have negative space in auto layout. and it's pretty cool. And I like to set things up so the auto layout behaves the closest to how I want for it to be. So that's why I'm distributing a horizontal spacing equally on all of these. And then I apply auto layout. Shift A. I've applied an auto layout. So now all of my circles are in one frame. And so what I'm going to do now is I can, instead of having 19 pixels between all of my circles here, I can set this to -7. And now they are on top of each other. And I can do a lot more or a lot less and do some cool things with that. I want this eclipse number 1 to be on top, eclipse 1 on top, 2 on top of 3, and 3 on top of 4. Like, well, there is a way to do that. If you go to the 3 dots icon here, there's a three dots, and we open this up, you can then say, instead of last on top, you want the first to be on top. And now we have the first one on top. In Figma, you can also do cool things like animation. So I could animate this to go from something like this to then go inside and be animated like that after, let's say, 2 seconds of someone being inside my page. Is everyone with me on how we set negative space and how we stack them, the order of stacking?
I think everyone's going to just have to get in there and play with it.
Yeah. So what we'll do is next Wednesday, I'll have 1 or 2 projects for us to do. Let me show you something pretty cool, which I wanted to show everyone. So let's say I have these headers and I also have footers. So if I were, if I were to have my frame, and this is where it's pretty, like, one of the things that I like about this is if I have a page, let's call this an email. So I would have an email here, and then I have my assets. When I add a header in, let's do the email to 600, because this is 600. If I were to start adding these, I would then have to do this manually, where I'm putting this one here, and then I'm putting the footer, and I'm putting the footer here, and I would manually have to set them up. Well, with auto layout, you don't necessarily have to do that, because in your email, you can set an auto layout of this, where I want everything that I drop in to align to the top center, to have 5 space in between, and to have 0 gaps on the top and the bottom. So now when I drop in anything at all, it's gonna start adding that automatically for me. And so this is something that is pretty powerful, because I don't have to think and I don't have to do it. And so then if someone says, no, Christine, I don't want this that you have in the middle of the email, I can just turn it off, and it'll automatically put everything that was at the bottom to the top. And so when you start creating a bunch of emails and you have to make some changes where you have to add or subtract components to your emails, editing will become much faster because you have set an auto layout to your full email frame. Is this helpful? What do you think?
Sure.
One thing that I started doing for auto layout, to understand auto layout, was I worked with rectangles, and I created a couple of rectangles and started seeing how they work within auto layout. So for example, it's like, well, if I have a couple of rectangles here, how do these rectangles, if I change them, if I add an auto layout, how will they work when I have something that is fixed? So let me see here. This one is fixed with, but then let's say the middle one, instead of fixed, I go into fill, and then I change the layout. See how it moves? So if you start playing with squares inside a frame, and start kind of like doing different things with them. So for example, I'm gonna do fixed width on this one, and they're 91 by 91. So I'm gonna put 91 here, take that out, 91, 91, and then I can then do something like, okay, so if I grab this guy and I copy him, what's gonna happen? Oh, I see. But then do you see how the auto layout is telling me always pay attention to the lines, because this ant line is telling me your layout is still here. So these guys are outside. So what do I have my frame set as? I have it as fixed. So it's not growing with what I have inside. So I can do hug content, and now it grew. So let me show you another way. If I change the color, nope, not of that, of my frame, I'm gonna fill my frame with a color. And I'm also going to add, on my frame, I'm going to add 5 padding on the right and on the left, or 10 padding on the right and on the left. So I can see that I have some padding there. So now see how it's fixed and my content is going outside of my frame. I can either clip that content to not see it. So I'm gonna clip that content so it makes that content hidden because it's outside, or I can reveal it, but then what I want is for my frame to auto size to the content that I have inside. So then hug content will extend that frame. So you can play to get a better handle on what auto layout is doing. Is everyone with me?
Yes, that was helpful.
Yeah, so and just like play around with it. Like I can have my frame, and then instead of hug at the bottom, I can have it as fixed, but then I can have all of my rectangles inside. I want them to extend to the top. So what would I do? Well, I want them to fill the container. And so this way, whenever I make my frame bigger, then all of the content inside is going to stay within the parameters of the top and the bottom of my frame. I can add padding on the top and the bottom. And so by adding padding, I still have where all of my rectangles are filling, but they're filling up to where the padding is. So if I grab all of these and then say fixed height, then if I make my frame bigger, they're not going to grow. If I set my frame height to hug, then it's just gonna hug my content. However, it's gonna hug my content up to the padding that I have. See that I have padding in there. So it doesn't necessarily look like it's hugging, but it is hugging. If I were to take all of the padding out, then you can see that it's hugging. And so if I were to make one of these grow, the background is gonna grow because it's hugging the content that is occupying the most space and biggest out of all of them. And so you can start doing kind of like really cool things like this with, let's say, the alignment. So I can have the alignment go up or go down depending on the content that I have inside that frame. So play with this a lot so that you can wrap your head around how it works. Was this helpful?
Yes, very helpful. Thank you.
All right. So with that, I'm going to leave you guys. I hope that you got at least half of what I taught of auto layout. And next class, we're going to continue working with auto layout. Love every one of you. And yeah, have a great rest of your week.
Have a good one.
Thank you.